Welcome to my channel, Rise Up with Steve. Please hit like, subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. Let me tell you something today, and I want you to hear me clearly. There comes a point in your life when you have to make a decision, not about the world, but about you. The decision is this: am I going to keep allowing people to treat me any kind of way, or am I finally going to become unavailable to disrespect? See, disrespect doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes quiet. It comes in being ignored. It comes in being taken for granted. It comes in people crossing your boundaries and acting like it's normal. And the reason they keep doing it is not because they're bold. It's because you've been available for it. You teach people how to treat you. Every time you stay silent when something hurts you, every time you accept less than you deserve, every time you keep showing up where you're not appreciated, you're sending a message. And that message says, it's okay. But listen to me now, it's not okay. Being unavailable to disrespect doesn't mean you become rude. It doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become clear. Clear about your worth, clear about your standards, clear about what you will and will not tolerate. Some people are going to be uncomfortable when you change. Let them be. Because the moment you stop begging for respect, the moment you start explaining yourself to people who already know better, something powerful happens. You start to respect yourself. And self-respect changes everything. Let me tell you something else. Everybody doesn't deserve access to you. Everybody doesn't deserve your time, your energy, your explanations, or your forgiveness. Some people only value you when you're exhausted, overgiving, and silent. The moment you stand up straight and say, not anymore, they call you difficult. No, you're not difficult, you're different now. And yes, you may lose people. You may lose conversations. You may lose invitations. But what you gain is peace. You gain confidence. You gain alignment with who God created you to be. Because you were never meant to shrink so someone else could feel big. When you become unavailable to disrespect, you stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining your pain to people who caused it. You start walking away not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to choose yourself. People will only treat you the way you allow them to treat you, and that truth can be uncomfortable to hear, but it's necessary. A lot of folks walk around confused, hurt, and angry, asking why others keep disrespecting them. The real question isn't why they do it. The real question is why you keep accepting it. Every time you laugh something off that hurts you, every time you stay quiet to avoid conflict, every time you let something slide just to keep the peace, you are setting a standard. You are teaching people what behavior is acceptable in your life. And once a standard is set, most people won't raise it on their own. Disrespect doesn't start big. It starts small. It starts with a tone, a delayed response, a broken promise, a comment that crosses the line. You feel it in your spirit, but you ignore it because you don't want to seem sensitive, dramatic, or difficult. So you let it go. Then it happens again. And again, over time, what should have been corrected early becomes normal behavior. The problem is not that people don't know better. The problem is that they've learned you'll tolerate it. You have to understand this. People watch what you accept, not what you say. You can talk all day about respect, but if your actions don't match your words don't matter. If you say you value yourself but keep showing up where you're overlooked, interrupted, or dismissed, the message you're sending is loud and clear. You're telling people that your boundaries are flexible and your feelings are negotiable. And some people will take full advantage of that. Becoming unavailable to disrespect starts with honesty with yourself. You have to admit where you've been too available, too forgiving, too understanding, too patient with behavior that should have been corrected or cut off. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Many people were taught to keep the peace, to be polite, to avoid confrontation at all costs. But peace that costs you your self-respect is too expensive. When you start to value yourself, your behavior changes. You stop over-explaining. You stop begging to be heard. You stop chasing people who consistently show you that you are not a priority. And here's the hard part. When you change, people notice. The same people who were comfortable disrespecting you will suddenly feel uncomfortable around you. They might say you've changed. They might say you're acting different. They might even say you've become selfish. But what's really happening is that the version of you they benefited from no longer exists. Teaching people how to treat you doesn't require yelling or arguing. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's distance. Sometimes it's a calm, firm no. And sometimes it's walking away without explaining yourself for the 100th time. You don't owe everyone access to you. You don't owe everyone your time, your energy, or your emotional labor. Access to you is a privilege. And privileges can be revoked when they're abused. The moment you stop accepting disrespect, your life starts to shift. Your circle gets smaller, but it gets healthier. Conversations feel lighter. Your mind feels clearer. You sleep better because you're no longer replaying moments where you should have spoken up. And most importantly, you begin to trust yourself again. Self-trust is built when your actions protect your worth instead of betraying it. Some people will rise to meet your new standard. Others will fall away. Let both happen. You are not responsible for managing other people's reactions to your growth. Your responsibility is to yourself to show up with integrity, confidence, and self-respect. When you do that consistently, you send a message without saying a word. Disrespect has no place here anymore. Disrespect often shows up in ways that are easy to dismiss, and that's what makes it so dangerous. It's not always someone yelling at you or openly insulting you. More often, it's subtle. It's being talked over. It's your time not being valued. It's promises that keep getting broken with no apology. And because it doesn't look extreme, you convince yourself it's not worth addressing. You tell yourself you're being mature by letting it go. But what you're really doing is teaching people that they can cross your boundaries without consequences. The human mind tries to protect relationships, even unhealthy ones. We make excuses for people we care about. We say they didn't mean it. They're just stressed, they didn't realize, or they'll do better next time. But patterns don't lie. When something keeps happening, it's no longer a mistake, it's behavior. And behavior that goes unchecked becomes a habit. The more you tolerate it, the more normal it feels to the person doing it. Many people confuse kindness with availability. They think being good means always being understanding, always being patient, always giving another chance. But kindness without boundaries turns into self-neglect. You can have a good heart and still say no. You can be loving and still walk away. Protecting your dignity does not make you harsh. It makes you healthy. When someone disrespects you, they are testing limits, whether consciously or unconsciously. They're seeing how far they can go. If there's no response, no correction, no shift in access, the message they receive is simple. This is allowed. Over time, the respect you deserve gets replaced with familiarity, and familiarity without boundaries often leads to disregard. The hardest part about addressing disrespect is the fear of loss. People stay silent because they're afraid of being abandoned, judged, or misunderstood. They'd rather tolerate mistreatment than risk being alone. But there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen, unheard, and disrespected. That kind of loneliness cuts deeper than solitude ever could. Becoming unavailable to disrespect requires courage. It means being willing to sit with discomfort instead of avoiding it. It means choosing long-term self-respect over short-term peace. When you finally speak up or pull back, not everyone will respond well. Some will get defensive. Some will minimize your feelings. Some will blame you for reacting instead of taking responsibility for their actions. That reaction tells you everything you need to know. Respect grows where boundaries are clear. When you set a standard and enforce it consistently, people either adjust or remove themselves. Both outcomes serve you. Those who value you will listen, reflect, and do better. Those who only benefited from your silence will resist change. Their resistance is not your problem. As you stop accepting subtle disrespect, your awareness sharpens. You become more intentional with your time, your energy, and your emotional investment. You no longer chase clarity from people who thrive in confusion. You no longer argue your worth. You simply live it. And that quiet confidence speaks louder than any confrontation. The truth is, No one will ever respect you more than you respect yourself. Once you understand that, you stop waiting for validation. You stop hoping someone will change. You realize that the power to shift the dynamic has always been in your hands. The moment you withdraw your tolerance for disrespect, you reclaim control over your life. A lot of people believe that respect is something you ask for. But in reality, respect is something you demonstrate through your choices. You don't earn respect by explaining your worth over and over again. You earn it by what you allow and what you refuse to accept. When you stay in situations where you are consistently minimized, ignored, or taken lightly, you are silently agreeing to that treatment, even if it hurts you inside. Many times, people notice the disrespect early, but they ignore their instincts. That inner discomfort, that quiet voice telling you something isn't right, is not weakness, it's awareness. But instead of listening to it, people talk themselves out of it. They say they're overthinking. They say they're being too sensitive. Over time, ignoring that voice disconnects you from yourself. And once that happens, it becomes easier for others to cross lines you should have protected. Self-respect is built in moments that feel small but carry weight. It's built when you correct someone calmly instead of laughing it off. It's built when you leave a conversation that's going nowhere instead of trying to prove a point. It's built when you stop showing up for people who only reach out when it's convenient for them. These moments may not look dramatic, but they shape how others see you and, more importantly, how you see yourself. There is a difference between patience and tolerance. Patience allows growth, tolerance allows repetition. If someone truly values you, they will care when you express discomfort. They may not get it right immediately, but effort will be visible. Disrespect continues only when effort is absent. At that point, staying becomes a choice, not an obligation. One of the biggest reasons people accept disrespect is history. Shared memories, past sacrifices, and emotional attachments make it harder to walk away. You remind yourself of who they used to be instead of who they are now. But the past cannot justify present mistreatment. Loyalty to a version of someone that no longer exists keeps you trapped in situations that drain you. As you begin to choose yourself, your reactions change. You stop reacting emotionally to every slight. You stop arguing with people who have already decided not to understand you. You start conserving your energy. That shift is powerful. It tells the world that your peace is no longer negotiable. You don't need to announce it. Your actions make it clear. People who benefited from your silence may try to guilt you when you change. They may remind you of everything they've done for you. They may accuse you of being distant or ungrateful. But gratitude does not require self-betrayal. You can appreciate what someone did in the past and still refuse to accept disrespect in the present. Choosing self-respect often means choosing a quieter life. Fewer arguments, fewer explanations, fewer people with access to your inner world. But in that quiet, you find clarity. You feel lighter because you are no longer carrying the burden of being mistreated and pretending it doesn't affect you. You start showing up more fully for yourself, and that becomes the foundation of every healthy relationship you build moving forward. Boundaries are often misunderstood because people confuse them with walls. A wall shuts everyone out, but a boundary simply defines where you end and someone else begins. When you don't have boundaries, people step into spaces they were never invited into. They make decisions for you, speak to you however they want, and expect access to your time and energy without considering your well-being. And the longer this goes on, the more normal it feels, even when it's slowly draining you. Many people struggle with boundaries because they were taught that saying no is rude. They were taught to be agreeable, accommodating, and easy to deal with. So when something feels uncomfortable, they smile through it. They say yes when they mean no. They explain themselves too much, hoping the other person will finally understand. But boundaries are not about convincing others. They are about honoring yourself. A boundary doesn't require anger or aggression. It can be calm. It can be quiet. It can be as simple as changing how available you are. When you stop responding immediately, when you stop engaging in disrespectful conversations, when you stop showing up where you are not valued, you are setting a boundary without saying a word. And those silent boundaries are often the most powerful. People who respect you will respect your boundaries, even if they don't fully understand them at first. They may ask questions. They may need time to adjust, but they won't punish you for having limits. On the other hand, people who benefit from you having none will react strongly. They may accuse you of changing, being cold, or acting superior. What they're really reacting to is the loss of control they once had. Setting boundaries forces you to sit with discomfort. There's guilt that comes with choosing yourself, especially if you're not used to it. You might replay conversations in your head, wondering if you were too harsh or too distant. But guilt is often a sign that you're breaking an old pattern, not that you're doing something wrong. Growth rarely feels comfortable at first. When boundaries are absent, resentment builds quietly. You start feeling irritated over small things because the real issue has been ignored for too long. You feel tight around certain people without knowing why. That exhaustion is your body telling you that your limits have been crossed repeatedly. Boundaries prevent resentment by addressing issues before they become heavy. You don't need to justify your boundaries to everyone. Some explanations are invitations for debate, and not every person deserves that access. You are allowed to decide what works for you and move accordingly. The right people will adjust. The wrong ones will fall away. Both outcomes protect your peace. As you practice setting boundaries, you begin to trust yourself more. You realize that you can handle difficult moments without abandoning yourself. That trust builds confidence. And that confidence changes how people interact with you. They become more mindful, more respectful, and more cautious about crossing lines because they know you will protect them. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about controlling your own responses. You can't stop someone from being disrespectful, but you can stop giving them a front row seat in your life. And once you understand that, you stop feeling powerless. You realize that protecting your peace is not rude, selfish, or unkind. It is necessary. Walking away is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. People often see it as giving up, as weakness, or as avoidance. But in reality, walking away is what you do when you finally understand your value. You don't walk away because you don't care. You walk away because you care enough about yourself to stop staying in situations that keep hurting you. There comes a moment when explaining, hoping, and waiting no longer makes sense, and choosing distance becomes an act of self-respect. Many people stay in disrespectful situations because they believe persistence will eventually be rewarded. They think if they love harder, give more, or stay patient long enough, things will change. But effort does not create respect when the foundation is missing. You cannot convince someone to value you if they've already shown you they don't. Staying longer only teaches them that there are no real consequences for their behavior. Walking away doesn't always happen suddenly. Sometimes it's a gradual withdrawal. You stop initiating conversations. You stop oversharing. You stop making excuses for someone's behavior. This slow pulling back is often a sign that you've reached emotional clarity. You're no longer reacting out of pain. You're responding out of awareness. That awareness is powerful because it keeps you from repeating the same cycle. There is often grief attached to walking away, even when it's the right choice. You grieve the potential you saw, the version of the relationship you hoped for, and the effort you invested. That grief can make you second-guess yourself. You may wonder if you should have tried harder or stayed quieter. But grief doesn't mean the decision was wrong. It means you care deeply. People who benefited from your presence may react strongly when you leave. They might suddenly change their behavior, make promises, or show temporary effort. This can be confusing, but consistency matters more than intensity. A short burst of attention does not erase a long pattern of disrespect. Walking away teaches you to trust patterns instead of words. Choosing to walk away also teaches you self-reliance. You learn that you don't need external validation to survive. You realize that peace feels better than chaos, even if it's quieter. That quiet gives you space to hear yourself again, to reconnect with what you want and what you deserve. As you move forward, you become more selective. You pay attention to how people make you feel, not just what they say. You notice whether their actions align with their promises. You stop romanticizing potential and start honoring reality. That shift protects you from repeating old lessons. Walking away creates room. Room for healthier connections. Room for respect. Room for growth. When you remove yourself from environments that drain you, you give life a chance to bring something better. And even if nothing changes immediately, you change, and that change is what ultimately leads you to a more peaceful, grounded version of yourself. Losing people is one of the hardest fears to face, especially when you've invested time, energy, and emotion into them. Many people stay in situations that hurt them simply because they are afraid of what life will look like without certain relationships. They worry about being alone, starting over, or being misunderstood. So they compromise their standards, silence their needs, and accept disrespect just to keep people close. But the truth is, keeping people at the cost of your self-respect is a lost cause greater than letting them go. When you begin to stand up for yourself, some people will naturally drift away. Not because you did something wrong, but because the dynamic changed. They were comfortable with the old version of you, the one who tolerated everything, overgave, and stayed quiet. That version made their life easier. The moment you raise your standards, you stop being convenient. And for some people, convenience is the only reason they stayed. It's important to understand that losing people does not always mean losing love. Sometimes it means losing dependency. Sometimes it means losing familiarity, and sometimes it means losing access to someone who finally realized their worth. Not everyone who leaves was meant to stay, and not everyone who stays deserves to. People come into your life for different reasons, and some of them are only meant to walk with you for a season. There is pain in letting go, even when you know it's necessary. You may replay memories, question your decision, or wonder if things could have been different. That emotional back and forth is normal. But clarity often comes after distance, not during chaos. Once you step away, you start seeing situations more clearly. You realize how much you were carrying, how often you were compromising, and how little space there was for your own needs. As people fall away, you begin to create room for healthier connections. Relationships that are built on mutual respect feel different. There's less tension, less anxiety, and less need to prove yourself. You don't have to perform to be accepted. You don't have to shrink to be loved. That kind of peace is rare, and it only comes when you stop settling for less. Letting go also strengthens your relationship with yourself. You learn that you can survive endings. You learn that your happiness is not dependent on anyone else's approval. That realization builds inner stability. You become less reactive and more grounded. You stop chasing people who don't choose you and start choosing yourself consistently. Some people will try to return once they realize you're no longer available the way you used to be. They may come back with apologies, nostalgia, or promises of change. This is where discernment matters. Words are easy when access is threatened. True change shows up in consistent behavior over time. You don't have to rush to reopen doors that you worked hard to close. Losing people as you grow is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of alignment. Your path becomes clearer when unnecessary weight falls off. You walk lighter, think clearer, and live more intentionally. And while it may feel lonely at first, that space eventually fills with peace, confidence, and connections that meet you where you are not where you are willing to settle.